Dear students, warm greetings to all of you. I hope you all are in the best of your health and taking good care of yourselves. Dear students, once again, you are welcome for your English literature class. And today, in this literature session, I would like you all to open your literature textbooks, that is Honeydew. We are going to begin with a new chapter, that is chapter number 7, A Visit to Cambridge. So before I start, I request you all to please open your books and page number 100, write down the date, day and class work on the top of the page. Let us know about the brief summary of the chapter, A Visit to Cambridge. The author of A Visit to Cambridge is Firdaus Kanga. He was a journalist and had traveled all over the world. He was also handicapped, but he never let that become his disability in any way. Also, he was an inspiration to the people around him. In this story, the author shares one of his experiences in England. The author describes his visit to Cambridge University, where he got a chance to interview Stephen Hawking. Hawking told him that he found it funny when people patronized him. He also added that he was not left with any choice other than being brave and accept his condition. The author found Stephen Hawking to be one of the most beautiful men in the world. At the end of the interview, Hawking gave a bit of advice to the handicapped people to concentrate on what is good in them. They can thus surely succeed in life. Let us know about the author of the story, Firdaus Kanga. He was born in the year 1960 and is an Indian writer and actor who lives in London. He has written a novel, Trying to Grow, a semi-autobiographical novel set in India, and a travel book, Heaven on Wheels, about his experiences in the United Kingdom, where he met Stephen Hawking. Trying to Grow was later turned into a film, Sixth Happiness, for which Kanga wrote the screenplay and in which he starred. Let us know about the theme or the aim of the lesson. This lesson was written by Firdaus Kanga. The lesson shows a person who could only move around with the help of a wheelchair, and he has accepted his disability. He doesn't fight it or gets sad over this fact. In fact, he roamed around all over the world and showed normal people that he is no different than normal people. He also went to Cambridge and there he met Mr. Stephen Hawking. The person who is paralyzed head to toe. Mr. Stephen wrote a book too about people that they should not get worried about their condition and must think positively, and the people around them should support them. This lesson supports all the people out there who are disabled, and it stresses to the point that they should live their lives as normally as they could, just like other normal people spend their lives. Now let us know about the difficult word meanings. The first word is metaphor, which is a noun, and the meaning is a thing regarded as representative or symbolic of something else. So here's the sentence. When we speak of gene maps and gene mapping, we use a cartographic metaphor. Successor is again a noun, someone who succeeds a person to an office or title, etc. Schoenberg saw himself as a natural successor to the German Romantic school. Astrophysicist is again a noun, a scientist who specializes in the study of space, stars, planets, and the universe. The director of the planetarium is a well-known and popular astrophysicist. Paralyzed is an adjective, partly or wholly incapable of movement, or you can say handicapped, wherein the body gets freezed. He became partially paralyzed. Disembodied is an adjective, separated from or existing without the body. A disembodied voice at the end of the phone, a disembodied ghost. Let us look at some more words. Disintegrating is a verb in the ing form, losing strength and gradually failing. Our shoes had to last until they disintegrated on our feet. Their marriage disintegrated. Exhaustion is a noun, a state of extreme physical or mental tiredness. He was pale with exhaustion, rapid exhaustion of fossil fuel reserves. Anguish is again a noun, severe mental or physical pain or suffering. She shut her eyes in anguish. Buoyant is an adjective, someone cheerful and optimistic. The conference ended with the party in a buoyant mood. Patronize is a verb in the first form. Treat someone with an apparent kindness which shows a feeling of superiority. She was determined not to be put down or patronized. Restaurants and bars regularly patronized by the stars were often crowded with paparazzi. Now here is the chapter in which there is a reading showcased in front of you along with the word meaning. So let us have a brief introduction. Before you read, this is the story of a meeting between two extraordinary people, both of them disabled or differently abled, as we now say. Stephen Hawking is one of the greatest scientists of our time. He suffers from a form of paralysis that confines him to a wheelchair and allows him to speak only by punching buttons on a computer, which speaks for him in a machine-like voice. Firdaus Kanga is a writer and journalist who lives and works in Mumbai. Kanga was born with brittle bones that tended to break easily when he was a child. Like Hawking, Kanga moves around in a wheelchair. The two great men exchanged thoughts on what it means to live life in a wheelchair and in how the so-called normal people react to the disabled. Now, further, you are supposed to read the lesson along with the slashes and underlining all the difficult words and spellings. Some word meanings are also given towards the right side and the left side of the lesson. For example, buoyant is written here, which means intensely active and vibrant. And on the next page, you have some more words. For example, torso, which is the upper part of the body. Incandescence, that is the inner glow or light. Accessory, not essential, but extra through decorative. Inflection is the rise and fall of the voice in speaking. Let us move further and know about some more meanings. Glitch, that's a phrase or idea used so often that it loses its meaning. Claustrophobic, very small and suffocating. Claustrophobia is an abnormal fear of being in an enclosed space. Gleefully means very happily, or you can say joyfully or delightfully. And this entire chapter or the story is a true story written by Firdaus Kanga, who is also a writer from Heaven on Wheels. Now let us go through the explanatory part of the lesson. A visit to Cambridge. Cambridge was my metaphor for England, and it was strange that when I left, it had become altogether something else because I had met Stephen Hawking there. Metaphor here is a thing regarded as representative or symbolic of something else. The author begins by telling the readers that at some point in life, England only meant Cambridge for him and nothing more. He further remarked that after his meeting with Stephen Hawking, the meaning and relevance of England in his life changed completely. It was on a walking tour through Cambridge that the guide mentioned Stephen Hawking, poor man who is quite disabled now, though he is a worthy successor to Isaac Newton, whose chair he has at the university. And I started because I had quite forgotten that this most brilliant and completely paralyzed astrophysicist, the author of A Brief History of Time, one of the biggest bestsellers ever lived here. The meaning of astrophysicist, as already discussed, is a scholar of astrophysics, a branch of physics, which is actually dealing with the stars, planets, etc. The author now mentions that he happened to be on a walking tour through Cambridge when his guide spoke about Stephen Hawking. The guide called him a poor man because he was differently abled. He even told the author that Stephen Hawking now holds the position in the university which was earlier held by Isaac Newton. The author reveals that before the guide had mentioned, he had forgotten that Stephen Hawking must brilliant and completely paralyzed astrophysicist, the author of one of the biggest bestsellers ever, A Brief History of Time, lived here. When the walking tour was done, I rushed to a phone booth and almost tearing the cord so it could reach me outside, phoned Stephen Hawking's house. There was his assistant on the line, and I told him I had come in a wheelchair from India. Perhaps he thought I had propelled myself all the way to write about my travels in Britain. I had to see Professor Hawking, even 10 minutes would do, half an hour, he said, from 3:30 to 4. So that was a time which was decided when Firdaus Kanga actually wanted to meet Stephen Hawking. Here the meaning of propelled is drive or push something forward. Here it means to come. Once the walking tour came to an end, the author hurried to the nearest phone booth and stretched the cord to the extent of almost tearing it so that it could reach him outside the booth because he was on a wheelchair. He called Stephen Hawking's residence, where his assistant answered the call. Assistant is the helper. The author introduced himself as someone who came all the way from India, which the assistant must have taken in the literal sense that he traveled all the way from India on a wheelchair to write about his traveling experience in Britain. The author explained that he needed to see Professor Hawking even if it meant only for 10 minutes, but the assistant gave him a 30-minute slot from 3:30 to 4 for the next day. So the meeting was fixed up. And suddenly I felt weak all over. Here I is Firdaus Kanga. Growing up disabled, you get fed up with people asking you to be brave as if you have a courage account on which you are too lazy to draw a check. The only thing that makes you stronger is seeing somebody like you. The only thing that makes you stronger is seeing somebody like you achieving something huge. Then you know how much is possible and you reach out further than you ever thought you could. The author began feeling weak at that moment. He relates how one is constantly told to be brave and cheerful when you grow up being differently abled, as if it were that easy. He mentions that people think one who is different is just lazy to draw a check on their courage account. In such a situation, the only thing that gives you courage and strength is seeing people like you do something big. It is only then you know there is hope and possibility, which makes you go beyond your limits and imagination. I haven't been brave, said the disembodied computer voice. The next afternoon, I have had no choice. Surely, I wanted to say, living creatively with the reality of his disintegrating body was a choice. But I kept quiet because I felt guilty every time I spoke to him, forcing him to respond. There he was, tapping at the little switch in his hand, trying to find the words on his computer, with the only bit of movement left to him, his long, pale fingers. Every so often, his eyes would shut in frustrated exhaustion, and sitting opposite him, I could feel his anguish, the mind buoyant with thoughts that came out in frozen phrases and sentences, stiff as corpses. Here, the meaning of disembodied is separated from the body. Anguish means severe mental or physical pain or suffering, and buoyant means intensely active and vibrant. So the next afternoon, when he actually went to see him, Stephen Hawking told him that he hadn't been brave. He spoke in his disembodied computer voice, that he had no other option left. The author wanted to reply that living so creatively, even with his disabilities, was a brave choice, but he refrained from doing so as his guilt took over every time he pushed Stephen Hawking to respond by talking to him. He spoke by finding the words on his computer and then tapping a little switch in his hand, with the only remaining movement left in his pale and long fingers. He would get easily fatigued and would shut his eyes every now and then in frustration. The author mentions how he could feel Hawking's pain as the thoughts in his intensely active and vibrant mind came out emotionless and stiff as a corpse. A lot of people seem to think that disabled people are chronically unhappy. I said, I know that's not true myself. Are you often laughing inside? About 3 minutes later, he responded, I find it amusing when people patronize me. And do you find it annoying when someone like me comes and disturbs you in your work? The answer flashed yes. Then he smiled his own way, smile, and I knew without being sentimental or silly that I was looking at one of the most beautiful men in the world. Chronically here means in a persistent and recurring way. Music means causing laughter and providing entertainment. Patronize means to be kind or helpful to someone, but to talk them as if they are inferior. Sentimental means prompted by feelings or tenderness or nostalgia. The author expresses how much most people think that people with different abilities are constantly sad and miserable, but as far as he's talking about himself, it is not true. He asks Hawking if it was true for him or was he laughing on the inside. It took Hawking almost 3 minutes to respond. He finds it entertaining when people are only kind to him but of his different abilities. The author further asks him if he feels irritated when people like him come and keep him away from his work, to which he actually answered a firm yes. After that, Stephen smiled his one-way smile, not giving in to emotions, but the author knew for sure that he was looking at one of the most beautiful and wonderful men in the world. Our first glimpse of him is shocking because he's like a still photograph, as if all those pictures of him in magazines and newspapers have turned three-dimensional. Then you see the head twisted sideways into a slump, the torso shrunk inside the pale blue shirt, the wasted legs. You look at his eyes, which can speak still, and they are saying something huge and urgent. It is hard to tell what, but you are shaken because you have seen something you never thought could be seen. Slump here means sit, lean, or fall heavily and limply. Torso is the upper part of the body. Then you have wasted, which is weak or emaciated. The author mentions how the first glance of Hawking startles you because he is motionless. Just as a photograph, it seems that all his photos in magazines and newspapers have become three-dimensional, but still, as you notice him further, his head is turned sideways, limply. The upper part of the body is shrunk inside the dull blue shirt and legs were weak. His eyes appeared as if they can speak. They are still yet trying to speak something of great significance and urgency. Now, before you, like a lantern whose walls are worn so thin you glimpse only the light inside, is the incandescence of a man. The body, almost it was irrelevant, means not so important, exists only like a case made of shadows. So that I, no believer in eternal souls, know that this is what each of us is. Everything else is an accessory. Here, the meaning of incandescence is the inner glow or the light or the spark that is within. Accessory is not essential but extra, though decorative. When you see him, it appears as if he is like a lantern whose walls are so worn out that you only see the light inside. Yes, before you is the inner glow of a man. It makes you feel that the body is irrelevant and exists only like a case made of shadows. It even makes the author a non believer in eternal souls. One realizes that a man is no more than that. Everything else is just not essential. What do you think is the best thing about being disabled? I had asked him earlier. Here I is again Firdaus Kanga. I don't think there is anything good about being disabled. I think I said you do discover how much kindness there is in the world. Yes, he said it was a disadvantage of his voice synthesizer that it could convey no inflection, no shades, or no tone. And I could not tell how enthusiastically he agreed with me. Agreed means that he was convinced with me and he actually said yes to whatever I told him. Synthesizer here is an electronic musical instrument typically operated by a keyboard, producing a wide variety of sounds by generating and combining signals of different frequencies. Inflection here means rise and fall of the voice in speaking. Now, the author asked Stephen what, according to him, was the best thing about being differently able, to which actually Hawking replied that he did not find anything good about it. The author then expressed that he thinks it makes you discover that there is so much kindness in the world. Stephen agreed. But due to his voice synthesizer, the author could not decipher the excitement behind his answer, as there is a disadvantage that comes with it, that it conveys no inflection, shade, or tone. Every time I shifted in my chair here, again I is used for Firdaus Kanga, or turned my wrist to watch the time, I wanted to make every one of our 30 minutes count. I felt a huge relief and exhilaration in the possibilities of my body. How little it mattered than that I would never walk or even stand. Here, exhilaration means a feeling of happiness, excitement, elation, or you can say jubilation. The author mentions that each time he adjusted himself in his chair or had a look at his wristwatch to track him time, he wanted to make sure that no single minute of the meeting went wasted. He adds, he was relieved and happy about the limited possibilities his body had to offer. In that moment, it almost did not matter to the author that he would never be able to walk or even stand for that matter. I told him how he had been an inspiration beyond Klitsch for me, and surely for others. Did that thought help him? No, he said, and I thought how foolish I was to ask. When your body is a claustrophobic room and the walls are glowing narrower day by day, it doesn't do much good to know that there are people outside smiling with admiration to see you breathing still. Now, with this, I would like to conclude. The author confessed to him how Stephen had inspired him beyond limits, and he was sure that he must have inspired a lot to others also. He asked if this fact made it any better for Stephen. Stephen said that it didn't. On hearing his answer, the author felt foolish for even asking such a question. This is because, as Stephen Hawking feels, when your own body is like a very small and suffocating room whose walls are getting closer day by day, the fact that people out there are happy that you are alive does not make much of a difference for you. Is there any advice you can give disabled people? Something that might help make life better? They should concentrate on what they are good at. I think things like the Disabled Olympics are a waste of time. I know what you mean. I remembered the years I had spent trying to play a Spanish guitar, considerably larger than I was. and how gleefully I had unstringed it one night. The half hour was up. I think I've annoyed you enough, I said, grinning. Thank you, sir. So the meeting was about to end, and the interview, which Virdos Kanga was taking with Stephen Hawking. Then further he says, stay, I waited, have some tea, I can show you the garden. The garden was as big as a park, but Stephen Hawking covered every inch, rumbling along in his motorized wheelchair. While I dodged to keep out of the way, we couldn't talk very much. The sun made him silent, the letters on his screen disappearing in the glare. Now, next, the author asked Stephen if he would like to give a piece of advice to other differently abled people, which would help make life a little easier for them. Stephen said that they should focus on their strengths and what they are good at. According to Stephen, things like Olympics for the differently abled are a waste of time. The author got the gist of what Stephen meant because he had spent years learning to play a Spanish guitar, which was larger than his own size, and how he unstringed it one night very happily. The 30 minutes came to an end, and the author smiled as he said, I think I've annoyed you enough, and continued to thank him for his time, but was actually interrupted. Interrupted means intervened or disturbed by Stephen, who instead asked him to stay. He waited for Stephen to say something next, and he offered the author some tea and a chance to show his garden. Even though the garden was as big as a park, Stephen showed him every inch and corner of it on his motorized wheelchair. The author tried not to come in his way. They couldn't converse a lot during that time, as the letters on his screen disappeared in the glare. It felt as if the sun made him silent. An hour later, we were ready to leave. I didn't know what to do. I could not kiss him or cry. I touched his shoulder and wheeled out into the summer evening. I looked back and I knew he was waving, though he wasn't. Watching him, an embodiment of my bravest self, the one I was moving towards, the one I had believed in for so many years alone. I knew that my journey was over for now. An hour passed and it was time to leave. The author did not know what to do as he left, as he could not kiss him or cry either. Thus, he touched his shoulder and went out into the summer evening in his wheelchair. The author knew Stephen was waving when he actually wasn't as he looked back. So this was all about the story when Firdaus Kanga goes to meet Stephen Hawking, and they both met for half an hour and an interview was carried on. So let us look at the moral of the lesson. The whole A Visit to Cambridge surrounds the concept of living a better life. The authors speak how one must keep their focus on the good and their talent, irrespective of the disabilities that one have. Disabilities will only take them down, but when someone focuses on their talent, then they will thrive and achieve new growth with an endless route. With this, the entire chapter is complete with the reading and the explanation part, along with the word meanings. Now let us do some revision. These are the questions which are given at the back of your chapter on page number 104, 105. Let's have a quick review of the answers. Cambridge was my metaphor for England to the writer. So you have to find out the answer. The first one is England was famous for Cambridge. The second is the writer phoned Stephen Hawking's house from the nearest phone booth. Every time he spoke to the scientist, the writer felt guilty because he forced the scientist to use his voice synthesizer. I felt a huge relief in the possibilities of my body. In the given context, the highlighted words refer to shifting in the wheelchair, turning the wrist. Let's look at the answers given on page number 104. Did the prospect of meeting Stephen Hawking make the writer nervous? If so, why? Did he at the same time feel very excited? If so, why? The writer felt nervous because he was doubtful whether he would be granted the interview. He felt excited at the same time because he had been there to see Professor Hawking for half an hour. Guess the first question put to the scientist by the writer. The writer's first question might be about Hawking's disability and how he had accepted it. Question number 3 is Stephen Hawking said, I have had no choice. So, does the writer think there was a choice? What was it? The answer is living creatively with the reality of his weakening body was actually a choice. Question number 4. I couldn't feel his anguish. What could be the anguish? Professor Hawking's mind was full of great ideas, but he couldn't speak them out clearly and forcefully. What endeared the scientist to the writer so that he said he was looking at one of the most beautiful men in the world? The answer is Professor Hawking's one-way smile. Question number 6, read aloud the description of the beautiful man. Which is the most beautiful sentence in the description? The line is before you like a lantern, whose walls are worn so thin you glimpse only the light inside, is the incandescence of a man. Question number 7, if the lantern is the man, what would its wall be? What is housed within the thin walls? What general conclusion does the writer draw from his comparison? The answer is, the walls of the lantern in Hawking's case were his skeleton-like physical structure. The glow of the eternal soul was housed within the thin walls of his body. The writer draws conclusion that the eternal soul is more important than the body. What is the scientist's message for the disabled? Professor Hawking's message for the disabled is that they should concentrate on what they are good at. It is foolish to try to copy the normal people. Question number 9, why does the writer refer to the guitar incident? Which idea does it support? The writer spent many years trying to play a big Spanish guitar. One night he loosened the strings joyfully. The incident supports the idea that the disabled people should practice only what they are good at. Question number 10. The writer expresses his great gratitude to Stephen Hawking. What is the gratitude for? The author felt much inspired after meeting with Stephen Hawking. Therefore, he felt grateful to him. And question number 11 is complete the following sentences, taking the appropriate parts from both the boxes. There was his assistant on the line, and I told him I had come in a wheelchair from India. You get fed up with people asking you to be brave as if you have a courage account on which you are too lazy to draw a check. There he was tapping at a little switch in his hand, trying to find the words on his computer. You look at his eyes, which can speak, and they are saying something huge and urgent. It is hard to tell what. It doesn't do much good to know that there are people smiling with admiration to see you breathing still. So this was all about the chapter in which you are given a detailed explanation about the life, achievements, and livelihood of Stephen Hawking and Firdaus Kanga. Hope you have enjoyed watching and listening to this video. Just take good care of yourselves and do watch the lesson again and complete the back exercises in the book. Thank you so much for watching and listening. God bless you.